All right, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to a daily Power Parsha. Today is Tuesday, May 17th, 2022. And I'm excited to be here with you to study Torah. All right, this week's Torah portion is Behar. Yesterday, we started the Torah portion, and the main mitzvah, like the big mitzvah at the start, was the mitzvah of Shemitah, which is the sabbatical year. Every 7 years, the land in the land of Israel was meant to lay fallow and not be worked, i.e., if you had a farm, you were not allowed to plow or sow or harvest or any of that in your field. It was essentially hefker, which means ownerless, vis-a-vis you. Anyone could eat from it, anyone could pick from it, and that was the status of the seventh year in the land of Israel. Till this very day, Shemitah is observed. Many farmers today in Israel are still observing the laws of Shemitah, and in fact, this year is a Shemitah year. So this year, there are many farms that are not being worked for by those that own them and are keeping the biblical commandment. In other words, it's one of those laws that is in place, one of the mitzvot that's in place, whether or not there's a temple. It's not about the temple. Right? If you notice, we're not bringing these crops to the Kohen, to the temple as an offering. It's just laying the land, lay fallow. And that is, in effect, whether or not there's a temple. So even to this day, farmers in Israel are observing the sabbatical year, and it's this actual year that it's happening. All right.
Do they get paid?
By who? By the government?
Yeah.
I don't believe so.
Oh, wow.
How are they living? That's a good question. Maybe they did some fundraising. Listen to this. I saw before the new year, before Rosh Hashanah, which is when the sabbatical year would start, I saw, emails going around and whatever of the opportunity for people in the diaspora, i.e. outside of Israel, to buy a piece of land or a piece of a farm or of a field in Israel, and thereby do the mitzvah of Shemitah. Are you with me on this?
Yes.
If you buy a square foot in a farm or in a field, right, in Israel, and then you don't work it, so you own land in Israel and you're not working it, so you're observing the sabbatical year. So I think that was a way of making some money, by farmers that have their land. If they can sell off part of the field before that sabbatical year and give people the opportunity to do a mitzvah and also get some cash flow, I think that was a win-win. But I don't know who exactly was doing it. Who was actually getting the money and who was facilitating it. I just saw an email go around. As far as how the average farmer is able to survive for a full year, I don't know. You would have to look it up. I mean, ask your son. He might know.
Right.
He's on the ground. The grandkids, right?
Right. Yeah.
they, you know what? If you find out, let us know tomorrow or anytime.
Okay.
Let us know. You find out that information. How is the conscientious Israeli farmer trying to keep Torah law? What type of income? How does that work for this year?
Okay. Yes.
All right, let's jump in. So that's how we started the Torah portion. We then talked about the Yovel, which is the Jubilee year every 50 years. Not only is it a Shemitah year, standard sabbatical, but also the land ownership reverts back to the original ownership, and any indentured servants go back to a state of freedom, etc. And then we talked about, what was the second reading? Let me just go back for a second. And then, we talked about not harming someone financially and not harming somebody with words. So don't rip off someone in a sale or a purchase, and also don't say something nasty or not only nasty, but what's the word I'm looking for? Dishonestly. Don't say something that's dishonest to someone else to try to get what you want out of them. All right, Torah reading for Behar. Today is Tuesday, reading number 3, Leviticus chapter 25, verse 19. Let's begin. If you keep, God says, if you keep the laws of Shemitah, sabbatical year, the laws of Yovel, the Jubilee year, if you're not defrauding each other financially or verbally, and the land will then yield its fruit, what's going to happen? Everything's going to grow in the right way. And you will eat to satiate. That means that you will eat to the point that you are satisfied and live upon it securely. Here, the Torah promises, God promises reward for keeping the aforementioned mitzvot, Shemitah, Yovel, and not defrauding each other. The land will yield its fruit. You will eat and be satisfied, and you will live securely upon the land. Those are some tremendous, tremendous blessings, right? Profit, in this case, food's going to grow. When you eat it, it will be in a healthy way, and you will live securely upon your land. Look, this middle blessing, you will eat to satiety. To me, that's a really important blessing. I want to correlate it to money. A person could earn a lot of money and yet end up spending it on things that are not happy things. All right. I'm sure I don't need to give examples of this, but a person can make a ton of money and it ends up going to things that are unpleasant. So it's one thing to make money. It's another thing to use it for only good things. Those are two different blessings. A person can make $10 million and end up spending it all on God knows what, negative things. So here the point is, may the land will yield its fruit, and you'll eat it to satiety, which means that you're going to eat it in a healthy fashion. It's going to satisfy you. It's going to be a good consumption. You'll expend it wisely or in a healthy fashion. And of course, you'll live securely in your borders. Verse number 20. And here the Torah God addresses directly the farmer who has no clue what they're going to do for a year. And if you should say, and by the way, rarely, if ever, does the Torah get into the potential question of the person who's struggling with the mitzvah, right? We don't find this regarding meat and milk. The Torah says, don't mix meat and milk. We don't find the Torah says, if you say, I really like a cheeseburger, so what should I do? God says, don't worry, I'll take care of you. I'll make sure that your life will go on. Never says that. Doesn't say that by other mitzvot. Here, the Torah gets into the psychology and the potential, not even potential, the obvious pushback against this mitzvah. Let's take a look at it inside. And if you should say, what will we eat in the seventh year? We will not sow, and we will not gather in our produce. What are we going to eat? How's this going to work? How are we going to make money? Listen to this. Know then, remember, it's not only making money. It's about when you don't plant in the seventh year, then you're not going to eat in the year that follows either, right? If you take a year off from the field, your field is going to be destroyed. It's going to be a disaster. It's going to take a while to get back into production. So God says, here's my promise. Know then that I will command my blessing for you in the sixth year, and it will produce for 3 years. In other words, the blessing of year 6 is actually going to be a triple blessing. There's going to be enough food for year 6, enough food for year 7, and enough food for year 8, because year 8, you're not going to get anything otherwise, because you didn't plant in year 7, you're not going to eat in year 8. Again, year 8, as I said yesterday, is really year 1 of the next cycle, but just for our mathematics, 6, 7, 8, as opposed to 6, 7, 1, which sounds weird, 6, 7, 8, that will be the blessing that God promises for observing the Shemitah. And you will sow in the 8th year while still eating from the old crops until the 9th year. In other words, you're going to eat year 6, year 7, and year 8, all from year 6's crops until the 9th year, until the arrival of its crop, i.e. the new crop that you planted in the 8th year, you will eat the old crop. I hope that makes sense. God is promising and guaranteeing that the land is going to respond, and it's going to be incredible. Let's look at Rashi. So the blessing is, the land will yield its fruit and you will live upon it securely, i.e. Rashi says, you will have no worry about a year of drought. Securely could mean a bunch of things. Securely could mean security, like you're not worried about external enemies attacking the land. You're not worried about invasions from foreign. You're not worried about invasions from foreign entities. That's one idea. But Rashi says that's not what it means here in this context. In this context of living upon the land securely, it means that you're not going to have anxiety. You're not going to have daigus. You're not going to have fear of drought. Securely meaning no worry about drought. And you'll eat to satiety. There will be a blessing in it, even inside your innards, Rashi says. It means the digestion is going to work out well. When you eat it, it's going to be good. It's going to be healthy. And then again, the Torah addresses the potential question. What are we going to eat in the 7th year? Gaval. We will not sow, we will not gather in the produce. Rashi says, what does it mean? And we will not gather in to the house for storage. Because as we said yesterday, the farmer, the owner of the field, is allowed to eat from the field, but doesn't own it to the exclusion of anyone else. In other words, everyone can eat from the field, including the owner, but you can't store it. Right? When it's your field, you can store the food, you can store the grain, you can store the produce, and you can use it throughout the year. Growing season is not 24/7. It's not 365 days a year. Sorry, I mean 24/7. I meant 365 days a year. It's a certain time of year. So what you do is you gather in all the produce and you keep it so it lasts for the whole year. Well, if it's not yours, everyone's gathering it. You have to eat for this week. And now what? What happens after that? Okay, well, that's the anxiety here. We will not gather in our produce. Rashi says, for example, wine and fruit of the trees and aftergrowth that grew spontaneously and therefore was not sown by you. So what are we going to eat? We can't gather that in. We can't store that stuff. So God answers, God promises, I will command my blessing and it will produce for 3 years. What does that mean? Rashi says for 3 years. For part of the 6th year from Nisan, when the crop is reaped until Rosh Hashanah. So second half of year 6. For the entire 7th Shemitah year. And for the 8th year, namely, for they will sow a new crop in Mar Cheshvan in fall of the 8th year and reap this new crop in Nisan while still eating of the 6 year's crop. So Rashi just gives us a timeline of when things grow in Israel. Things will grow in the spring and summer in Israel, right? That's when things grow. Like, I don't know, April, May, June, that time of year. So you're planting in September, October, and it's growing essentially 6 months. It's coming up 6 months later. So the blessing kicks in the 6th year, second half of the 6th year, when things are growing, the full 7th year when you're not doing anything to the land, and then the first half of the 8th year when you planted, but that didn't grow until after the second half of that year, and that's when things will grow and return normally. So those are your 3 years, half of 6, the full 7, and half of 8 until the new crop grows. Yes, Donna. So
in modern day Israel, if someone buys a piece of land that's never been farmed for some reason and wants, so is the sabbatical, does he just move in? Does he just take whatever year? Is there a universal sabbatical or is it?
Excellent question. Excellent question. Yes. The answer is yes. It's not about when you bought it. It's not you count the years from when you got it. It's an objective cycle. Right. And that's a very important point to clarify. Everybody observes the sabbatical year the same year. So if you bought a field, or not you, if one buys a field, like right before sabbatical year, that was not the best due diligence, right? That was not a good, I mean, unless you don't care, it's fine. I mean, it's like you just, give it a year off and then start actually working it. But yeah, you're exactly right. It's an objective year cycle. It's just like it's like Shabbos, right? Shabbat. It's an objective. It's
the leap Shabbat, year, a leap year,
or a leap year. Exactly. Yeah. It's happening. It's on the calendar. It's set. So this year is a sabbatical year, and if anybody bought a farm right before, yeah, there you go. And I should say that not everyone observes the sabbatical year, just like not everyone observes any given mitzvah. That's just the way it is. However, it's important for someone that wants to, eat food in a spiritually conscientious way, it can become a little tricky to eat produce imported from Israel right about now. You with me on this? Because, sorry, not import. Imported from Israel or exported. Anyway, produce from Israel that hits our shores, or anything like crackers or anything that's made of wheat. So you want to make sure that you're buying it and eating it from a farm that observed Shemitah. Otherwise, it would be, on a mitzvah level, problematic. So that adds another wrinkle to buying Israeli foods around this time. Okay. Yeah. Okay, back inside. Let's take a look at Rashi. And you will sow in the 8th year while still eating the old crops until the 9th year. Rashi says, until the festival of Sukkot in the 9th year. The time the crop of the 8th year was brought into the house. Oh, sorry, I need to clarify one more time. In that 8th year, the harvest, the food grows in April, May, June. But as I mentioned, I don't remember when, I don't know, a few days ago or a few weeks ago, or within the last little bit of time, they would leave the produce in the harvest in the field to dry out, and they would bring it in Sukkot. So essentially, that's when you're only starting to eat. You don't eat, at least from the grains that grow. You're not eating right away in Passover time of the 8th year, because you're letting it dry out in the field, and you're only eating it the following 6 months later, essentially the following Sukkot. As Rashi says, for throughout the summer season, it was kept in granaries in the field. In Tishrei, that is the time the crop is gathered into the house. Now, there were occasions when it would need to yield for 4 years. Look at that. For 4 years. Namely, in the 6th year preceding the 7th Shemitah, when they would refrain from doing work on the land for 2 consecutive years. The 7th year, which is Shemitah, and the Jubilee year, which is the Yovel year. A verse, however, refers to all other Shemitah years, i.e. the 1st through 6th cycles of Shemitah. What Rashi's saying is, when God is saying, don't worry, I got this. My blessing will last for 3 years. Every 50 years, the blessing has to last for 4 years, not just 3 years, because it's got to be year 6, year 7, year 8, and year 9. Why? Because year 6, well, that's the first year. The food has to come up. Year 7, nothing was planted. Year 8, again, nothing is planted because it's Yovel, Jubilee, every 7 cycles of 7 is the Jubilee year. And then the following years, 6, 7, 8, the 9th year would be the first year that you can plant, but it doesn't come in until halfway through, and you're not gathering it in until the following year, until you're 10 in this case. So that would throw things up. Well, not throw things up. That would enhance the need for the miracle. Instead of 3 years, 4 years of blessing. Okay, but God says, I got this. No need to worry. No need to panic. I got this. Okay, back inside. We did Rashi's for the first several verses. Let's go. Let's go to verse 23. The land shall not be sold permanently. Okay, the land shall not be sold permanently, for the land belongs to me, God says. The land belongs to me. For you are strangers and temporary residents with me. So interesting. So interesting when you start seeing the world from like God's perspective, when God brings us into his view of things. It's like, you guys are very temporary. All of us. I mean, how long are we here for, right? We're strangers, we're temporary, we're visitors, temporary residents, which, by the way, also highlights or I think brings into focus when God says, treat the stranger amongst you kindly, right? Someone who's visiting or temporary resident, treat them kindly, right? You know what it's like to be cast as an outsider. That's not good. But if you think about it from God's perspective, everyone is a temporary resident. Imagine, I want to give you an example. I know it's not exactly what the Torah is discussing here, but I want to give you an example. Imagine you have a big house, you have a mansion, and there's somebody that you meet that needs a place to stay. Okay, need a place to stay, so you invite them in. You give them a room in your house, plenty of room, plenty of space. You give them a room, and they're so grateful. Oh, they're so grateful to be given housing. You hook them up with housing for free. Unbelievable. And then what happens? Somebody else falls in need, and you invite them and you give them a room. Imagine if the first guy was there for, let's say a year, and now you bring in another guy. Imagine if the first guy looks at the other guy and says, "What are you doing here? Hey, this is my house." It's like, "How dare you? I can't use the bathroom because you're brushing your teeth now and I need to go in. I was here first." You would tell the guy, "Buddy, it's not your house either." It's like, you're getting all territorial. You're also a guest because you were there first. You were there first. So you're looking negative at the other guy. Are you kidding me? You're a guest and you're a guest. Get along. Like, I'm the balabas. I'm the owner of the house. You're a guest and you're a guest. One guest is looking down at the other guest. Come on. That's how God looks at it when we get all territorial. God says, "Don't you remember? This is my mansion. All y'all are guests. Everyone here is a guest. You're a guest and you're a guest." So one guest is going to turn snub their nose at the other guest. Are you kidding me? It's my house. To remind us of this, we have the Shemitah year, the Sabbatical year, where God says for 1 year, it's not yours. It's almost like, going back to my analogy, like the owner of the palace says, or the mansion, the owner of the mansion says, "Okay, for 1 week, you don't have access to your room," or whatever it is. Like, I gave you a room, you don't have access to it. Just so you're reminded who's really the owner here. Just so you don't get so comfortable that it's like, "Oh, look at this mansion that I built." That you built? I built this path. Like, don't claim ownership if it's not yours, right? So that's kind of what God says with the Shemitah, what God does with the Shemitah. God says every 7 years, you're going to be reminded that it's not actually yours. It's not actually yours. I'm doing you a favor. I'm being nice, giving it to you. Not that I'm asking for much. I don't want you to, I don't require validation or constant gratitude. I'm not needy like that. But just for your own health and well-being and the health and well-being of society, you need to know that you're not in charge. You need to know that it's not your mansion. You need to know that you're living in God's beautiful world. Because the moment you think it's yours, that's when all the fighting begins. All of the territorial fighting. It's mine, it's not yours. I'm on the inside, you're on the outside. I'm better than you, you're worse than me. All of that begins from entitlement, from the sense of it's mine. Shemitah was designed to break that, and to remind us we don't own this. We, all of us, are temporary, very temporary residents. We are tourists in God's world. That's it. It's the extent. By the way, this is not to make us depressed and bemoan our mortality, or to think, well, life is futile anyway. What's the point? It's so short. That's not the intention. Intention is very specifically designed so that we don't become arrogant, territorial, and hostile to others. That's it. How many times did the Torah say, last week's Torah portion and throughout Torah, how many times did the Torah say to be careful to treat the other with respect? And if the instruction to do that is not enough, then take a year off from your farm, take a year off from your field, and remind yourself that you don't actually own this world. And the moment you know you don't own it, you're probably going to fight less about it. That's the goal. That's the intention. As we see here, literally described inside the Torah's text. The land, and this is not about Shemitah necessarily, it's about when you sell land every 50 years, it reverts back to the original owner. But it's the same concept, same mitzvah, same result. I don't own this. I bought a piece of land in Israel. After 50 years, it goes back. You only buy it pro rata, as we said, right, up until that 50 years. But the point is, the land shall not be sold. Back to 23, I'm going to read it again. The land shall not be sold permanently. Why? If you could buy or sell land permanently, you know what that would engender within a person, that would kind of inculcate within a person, that would train or educate a person to believe that it's theirs. That's dangerous. Human beings thinking that they own things, thinking that it's theirs, they created it, that's the biggest danger. That arrogance, that entitlement is the source of all hostility and all fighting. Straight up. So the land, God says, verse 23, shall not be sold permanently. For the land belongs to me. I don't know how more clearly God could say this. The land meaning the earth, or especially the land of Israel. The land belongs to me, for you are strangers and temporary residents with me. You don't own the palace or the mansion. I do. You're a guest in my house, just like the other guy. That's it. You're guests. And if you think, no, I'm permanent. Okay. Every 7 years, let go of your field, and every 50 years, real estate purchases revert. Therefore, throughout the land of your possession, you shall give redemption for the land. Right? Throughout the land of your possession means the land of Israel. You shall give redemption for the land. Redemption, geula. There's redemption. Redemption means freedom. Freedom from narcissism. Freedom from a mistaken notion that we own things and we're forever. Again, the biggest danger, I'm going to rephrase this slightly. The biggest danger for human beings is believing that they are in control, or that they are in charge. Us believing that we are godlike, or that we are God, that's where all the problems begin. There's God, there's the one who created, built, and sustains the mansion, and then there's us. And we are temporary residents. We are guests in God's home. Like we said last night, treat it nicely. You're a guest in someone's home, you can't trash it. Imagine somebody says, hey, you need a place to live? No problem. I got you covered. I have a beautiful room in my beautiful mansion. Gratitude. Hopefully, ideally, right? You have gratitude, just incredible gratitude. Now you're going to go and trash the place. You're going to kick walls. You're going to punch holes through the wall. You're going to spray paint, graffiti. Of course not. You're going to treat it nicely. You're going to take care of the space. So that number one, got to take care of our world. Number two, not to become entitled. Sense of entitlement, like I own this, you're out. Who, what, where, when? Yes, in Judaism, there are laws of ownership. Yes. In fact, in our course Beyond Right, actually I have the textbook right here, right? In our new JLI course Beyond Right, lesson 5 talks all about ownership from a Jewish perspective. There is the concept of ownership, granted. But at the same time, we're not meant to become arrogant about it and think that we're a God, that we're in control, that we built it, that we created it. That's very dangerous. And so these mitzvot, Shemitah, Yovel, the sabbatical year, the Jubilee year, the idea that when you sell property, it reverts back in that Jubilee in the 50th year, all of those were designed for the same point, to remind us that we're temporary residents, we're guests in God's beautiful earth. All right, let's look at Rashi. Let me share my screen. Let's jump in. Okay. Rashi, the land shall not be sold permanently. Although this is already understood from the earlier verses in our passage, verses 10 and 13, it is stated here to impose a negative commandment regarding the reversion of fields to the original owners in Jubilee, that the purchaser must not seize the land forcibly in an effort to keep it as a permanent sale. The Torah says when you buy land at 50 years, and again, to Donna's point before, this is a universal or objective 50-year count. It's not 50 years from the date of your purchase. It could be that the next year is year 50. It could be that you still have another 49 years. Who knows? Depends on when you buy it. But the purchaser is not allowed to seize the land forcibly and say, it's mine, I'm not giving it back. I bought it, I'm not giving it back. That would not be right. There's a negative commandment over here. The Torah says not only should it revert back, it's not allowed to not revert back. So someone who tries to hold it violates not only the positive command, but also the negative commandment. Permanently, Rashi says that means irreversibly. Permanent, irreversible sale should not happen with land in Israel. Why? For the land belongs to me, Rashi says, so says God. Do not be selfish about the land, hesitating to return it to its rightful owner, Jubilee, because the land does not belong to you. God says it belongs to me. Therefore, throughout the land of your possession, you shall give redemption to the land. Rashi says the seemingly superfluous word here, throughout. Right. Why throughout? It says, Uvechol eretz achuzatchem. And in the entire land of your possession, or throughout the entire land of your possession. Why does it say throughout? It should say Uve eretz achuzatchem. In the land of your possession. Why throughout? Rashi says it comes to include the right of relatives to redeem houses of walled cities and a Hebrew slave. In other words, not only can the owner buy back his home, but the relative can also buy back, and the relative can also redeem a Jewish indentured servant.
Rabbi,
Yes.
is it the year? Do you count the year that it was purchased, and then you say you purchased it from them? Is it year 1 for you, and it could be year 11 for them, or no?
Good question. With regards to the Jubilee year, and or the Shemitah year, it's an objective count. So if it's year 11 for everybody, it's year 11 for you, for the purchaser, even though for you it's year 1 because you just bought it.
Yeah.
If it's year 11, then it's really year 11.
I
Therefore, the purchase price would, the market would adjust itself and you wouldn't pay full price for the house. So let's just use a simple example. Let's say there was a house that was, let's use a very, very simple number, $50,000, $50,000. So essentially it's kind of like $1,000 a year, right? So if you buy it year 1, great, pay the full $50,000 because you have 49, whatever. You have about 50 years of usage. If you buy it year 11, the purchase price is only gonna be about 40. Why? Because you only have another 40 years. You didn't have the first 10 years or 11 years of usage. Right. So you missed out. I mean, not blaming anyone, but the reality is you're not going to have full use. The seller probably won't be able to sell it for $50,000 because who's going to want to buy it only for 40 years at the full price of 50? Now, if you live in times like these, you could sell it for $1 million. Why? Because real estate. But the point is that that it would be prorated essentially, so that it reflects how much actual usage the purchaser has. Now, yeah, no problem. So now we look back at Rashi. The simple meaning is connect to the passage that follows, that one who sells his property is permitted to redeem it after 2 years, either he or his relative, and the purchaser cannot impede this redemption. Basically, as the Torah will continue, we're not going to do it today, but as the Torah will continue, there is a way to redeem property after its sale, and I'll explain what redeem means, even before the 50th year. Remember, every 50 years, the land goes back to its original division, right? The land goes back to its original owners and tribal divisions. Remember, the land of Israel was divided by the tribes. So this is a way to get everything back to the way it was originally partitioned or apportioned, as it were. But what if somebody sells their ancestral land, their family field, because they needed the money? They needed the money. They needed the $50,000, so they sold it. But then they end up, they use that, they invested in business, and they make profit, and now they can buy it back. They want to buy it back. Do we tell the owner, sorry, buddy, too late, you got to wait 50 years? Or do we allow them to purchase it back? Because if the intention is that it go back to the original owner, what if the original owner has the money sooner than the 50 years? Can they buy it back? Is there a buyback program? The answer is yes, but depending on where the field was and what it looks like. Is it a field? Is it a house? Is it in a walled city? Is it not in a walled city? Depending on how we answer those questions is how the law flows. We'll deal with that. With those cases and those details tomorrow. Sorry. Let me see when we're going to deal with that. Yes, the next few days. In reading 4, in reading 5, we speak about this extensively. Hold on. Yeah.
Rabbi Ari,
4 and 5. Yes. Hey,
there's
Mark.
an interesting note. In Rashi, on the very last pasuk there,
Yeah.
it says of his ancestral heritage. He says, but not all of it. It says the Torah. This is what Rashi says. The Torah teaches us proper conduct, that he should leave a field for himself. But what if he hasn't got any money? I don't understand that. You may say, yeah, I'm not supposed to sell the whole thing, but I don't have a choice. So why does it say that?
Wait, can you read that again? Wait, can you read that
Sure.
one more time?
Yeah, in other words, the very last pasuk says, it says if your brother becomes impoverished and sells of his ancestral heritage. That's what it says in the Torah. And Rashi says of his ancestral heritage, but not all of it. The Torah teaches us proper conduct, that he should leave a field for himself. That's what Rashi says. But what if he doesn't have a choice? How can that be proper conduct?
Right. Good question. You're right. I think it's talking about a case where there is an option to keep some of it. Yeah. You're right. If there's no other option, you got to do what you got to do. Yeah, for sure. But ideally, I think the point is, what's the ideal? And then we have to get to the practical. The ideal is that the fellow who sells the property because he needs the cash should retain some of it. Because again, God has an interest in keeping things. There's really 2 points. Number one, to remember that God's in control of things. And number two, God has an interest in keeping things in the original families, the original tribal divisions, familial divisions, etc. Look, it's a model. It's a very fascinating model. The question would be, is it realistic? But the other point is, and we'll see this over the next few days, is what's the alternative? I mean, the alternative is a system, and I'm not trying to condemn any other system, including right here in the U.S. But you have another system. You have other systems where it ends up being that only a certain percentage of people are actually owning homes and owning property, and others aren't, and it's creating a gulf in when it comes to income and it creates a financial gulf between those that have property and therefore have wealth, and those that don't have property and don't have wealth. And there's a big imbalance over there. And I think that in the Jewish system, and obviously it's much smaller, it was much more contained. We're not dealing with a massive country of, hundreds of millions of people. I get it. These are things that question is it scalable? Can you go from, back then in the times of Moses, how many people did they have? They had 2 or 3 million. Can you scale 2 or 3 million to 350 million people? That's another question, and that's a valid question. But think about that concept. Think about the ancient laws of Israel, where every family, every tribe, every family had land. And even if they sold land because they needed the money, they got the money, and eventually they got back the land. It's unbelievable. The concept is unbelievable. We've talked about classes. We may even have done it in Judaism's Gifts of the World. I don't remember if it was there or in another class that we talked about this very concept in this very context, which is this was Judaism's way, God's way, according to some commentaries, of not just reminding us that God's in control, but allowing a more equitable division of assets and ensuring that even if for a generation and a half or two, right? So they fell into hard times, at some point, there's going to be the possibility to once again, to have a source of income, a source of wealth. This is part of the fabric of the Jewish sociological, the Jewish vision, the Torah's vision of a Jewish society, where everyone has, and even when they sell, they're going to get it back, so that you don't have generational poverty. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. Is it scalable? Can we transfer that to the US? I don't know how you would do that. I really don't. I mean, like, say easily the ship has sailed anyway, either way, but I don't know how you do that when you don't have a people that begins as one with a similar focus and mission and whatever, 12 tribes of the same, ultimately the same mishpacha, the same family. It's much easier and more doable when you have that type of containment, and it's a smaller scale. However, that being said, the values of Torah certainly ring true, and the value is we want everyone to be okay. We want everyone to be reminded that God is in control, that we're all guests in God's home. All of these are really important lessons. So as we conclude today's DPP, I think we'll just focus on this. Remember the analogy or the analogy of the fellow who owns the mansion and invites one person in and then invites the second person in, and how person one turning on person two would be silly. Person one turning on person two and saying, "Oh, you're just a guest." It's like, did you look in the mirror? You're also a guest. When we look down at others, we're like, "Oh, we own and you don't." Essentially, it's the same thing. Let us never become so arrogant and filled with hubris that we can't see the other as a mirror of ourselves, all temporary guests in God's home. I'll conclude with a story, one of my favorite stories. The story takes place, who was it? Was it the Maggid of Mizrich? I want to say it was the Maggid. I think so. Where a wealthy visitor came to see the Rebbe, the Maggid of Mizrich. He was the second generation of the Chassidic movement. It was the Baal Shem Tov started the Chassidic movement, and his major student and successor was Rabbi Behar of Mizrich, known as the Maggid or the preacher of Mizrich. So he was second generation Chassidic movement. He was the major teacher of the Alter Rebbe, who was the founder of Chabad. There's the general Chassidic movement and then the Chabad Chassidic movement, two different things, related obviously. But the second generation of the Chassidic movement was the Maggid of Mizrich. And he lived, if I have the story correct with the right person, he lived very simply. He lived in a simple hut, barely any furniture, very sparse. Nowadays we would call it open plan, but it was very, very, is the word austere? Very simple, very simple. So once there was a wealthy fellow who went to the Maggid for a blessing. Now this is before Facebook, YouTube, social media. Back in the day, if you never met someone, you don't know what they look like. If you were never there, you don't know what their house looked like. You had no idea. You just heard that this is a great tzaddik who can give blessings and advice. So this fellow takes the journey to Mizrich to find the Maggid. He asks around, where's the Maggid of Mizrich? Where's the Rabbi? Where's the Rebbe? And he was told to go in such and such hut by the edge of the forest. That's where you'll find him. Okay, so he goes and finds the hut, knocks on the door. The Maggid invites him in. They have a conversation, and the man asks his questions, and the Maggid answers and gives him blessings, etc. At the end of the conversation, the man turns to the Maggid and says, please forgive me for asking this question. You're a great rabbi, a great scholar, a great tzaddik, a great mystic. Why are you living so meagerly? Why are you living so impoverished? Where's all your stuff? Where's all your furniture and possessions and stuff? So the Maggid turns to him and says, good question, but I have a question for you. Where's all your stuff? I don't see all your stuff. Where's your stuff? He's like, Rabbi, I'm just passing through. I'm just traveling. In my home, everything's set. The Maggid said, I'm also just passing through. In my home, above, everything's set. We're all temporary travelers in this journey of life. And when we remember that, it does us all a lot of benefit, right? It's all a journey. It's all a journey. And we're here to do whatever we can to make the world a better place. All right. Thanks for joining me today for DBP. Ray, great to see you. Donna, great to see you. Sarah, great to see you. Mark, great to see you. And Ekaterina, great to see you as well. All right. Any questions, comments before we close out?
What time is tonight?
8 o'clock. 8 o'clock. Yeah, 8 o'clock. We got tonight's class is Zoom. Great class. It's all about cancel culture and the Jewish value of personal rehabilitation. Oh, speaking of which, Mark, I wasn't sure if you were coming Tuesdays or Thursdays. I have a book for you. I don't know this week. Do you want to do Tuesday or Thursday? Because if you want to do Tuesdays, it's too late to get it to you now, but I can send it to you and you can get it. Or are you here? Either way, it's fine.
The plan is Thursday.
Okay.
Because Stanley and I are going to both be there on Thursday with the idea to play golf.
Perfect.
And if you can join us, join us.
Okay, I know he texted me. I have to text him back. I'll check. I'll check this week. Maybe this week.
Okay,
Perhaps
cool.
I'm going to check.
Cool.
So I'll keep your book here. So I got your book. I got it covered. Okay, good.
Great. Okay, thanks.
Donna, you had a question, comment?
Yeah, I just was, when I was going to get the Parsha portion for me online here, I came upon, you know how they try to get you to all these interesting stories. And so like, I got to one that says 7 things people get wrong when learning Kabbalah and how to get on the right track. So I just so they go through different myths. Myth number 2, the basic books of Kabbalah have been translated and made accessible to anyone who wants to become more spiritual. You would think, why should that be a myth, right?
That sounds legit.
Okay, but the truth, the word, according to Tzvi Freeman, truth, the word Kabbalah means received, because you can't learn Kabbalah without a teacher who will provide you this wisdom through the lens of unbroken received tradition.
Nice.
Very cool.
Nice. That's very cool. I like that. By the way, Tzvi Freeman, he's amazing. Rabbi Freeman is amazing. And he lives here in Atlanta.
Beth
Yes.
Tefillah. He's involved with Beth Tefillah.
Yeah, he lives up in Sandy Springs. He moved here a few years ago, right before the pandemic.
Huh.
Yeah, he lived in Vancouver, Toronto, Los Angeles, and now he lives here in Atlanta. He's got his kid. Hold on, Mark, Rabbi Sharfstein from Georgia Tech.
Yeah, his daughter married him, right?
That's his daughter, right? So he's got a few kids. They have a few kids that live here. There's a few siblings.
Oh, okay.
So they follow the mishpacha. That's how it works, right? Follow the kids and the grandkids. All right, great to see you all. Hold on, I see some chat activity. Why Shemitah diaspora is observed? Oh, okay, yeah, good. So it's a technicality, essentially. In other words, so Sarah's asking is, why don't we observe Shemitah here? And the answer is because the Torah says that when you go into the land of Israel, then observe Shemitah. So it's tied into the land itself. The concept of Shemitah is universal, but the practical application is the what's it called again? Is only in Israel. But you're right. Conceptually, we should be Shemitahing all over, and not only every 7 years. We should always be living the Shemitah life, right? Hashtag. I feel like there should be a hashtag, like living the Shemitah life. That perspective of I'm not in charge, right? I'm like the Surah the Maggid. I'm just passing through, like everyone else, right? Just passing through. You're passing through. I'm passing through. We're fighting with each other, right? We're grabbing. It's like, imagine you're the owner of a mansion. You invited 2 guests in, and now they're fighting with each other. It's like, how much longer before I kick you both out? Literally, right? How much longer before I kick you both? You guys are fighting over the toothpaste. It's my toothpaste. I bought the tooth. You didn't buy it's my toothpaste. You're fighting over land that you didn't create. You're fighting over water resources that you didn't create. You're fighting over a lake. It's not your lake. We're fighting over toothpaste. It's an unbelievable, the perspective of Torah, of God. You see, we look at everything, obviously, from our perspective, like bottom up, like our really limited and petty perspective. The Torah gives us glimpses of a divine perspective, and it's breathtaking and life-changing. All right, so I hope that makes sense. But you're right. We should do it here conceptually, and we literally should be living our lives with this vision. But technically, we can't, technically, we don't have that mitzvah here. All right.
Real quick, can I ask, how did the conversation go last night? It reminds me of Tzvi Freeman's book.
Oh, it was fantastic. Yeah. About the healing of the earth. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was great. We're going to put up the audio.
Cool.
Hold on. Let me see if it's up already. We have a full recording on that. It was really nice. Let's see if it's up yet. No, not yet. Okay. All right. It's going to go up soon. It'll be up hopefully today. So check your favorite, either SoundCloud page or not. Okay. Check our SoundCloud page or use your favorite podcast catcher or app to catch knowledge on the deeper side in Intown Jewish Academy. All right, everybody. Good. And by the way, I mentioned this. Who did I mention this to? To Donna, I think. Oh yeah, at the beginning of the class. Oh, but I don't think I mentioned this. I'm working on an opportunity for a get-together. Not going to say a final get-together, but on a get-together, maybe like a barbecue or something on a Sunday to get together. We did it last year. We'll do it again.
Right.
Who's got?
Right.
The date I'm looking at is June 26th. Nothing is said. Nothing is determined yet. But this morning I was honing in on Sunday, June 26th as a good date to get together and connect and laugh and, schmooze. So that is that. Okay, stay tuned.
Thank you, Rabbi.
It's a great pleasure. Great to see everybody. Have a wonderful day. Hope to see you tonight for lesson 2 of Beyond Right, or Thursday. Till then, shalom. Take care.
Thank you. Yashkoach.
Pleasure.